Om Sahana Vavatu Sahano Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavakai Tejasvinavadhitamastu Ma Vidvishavahai. Om Shanti 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 Harihi Om. Om Sthapakaya cha dharmasya Sarvadharmaswarupine Avatar-varisthaya Ramakrishnaya te namaha. Smriti-purananam Alayam Karunalayam Namami Bhagavat-padam Shankaram Loka-shankaram. So we are continuing the discussion on this text, Vivekachudamani. So just to recapitulate what we already discussed. In the first session, we discussed the value of human birth and the imperative to strive for liberation, for mukti, and how to get out of this samsara, this eternal rotating cycle of life, death and rebirth, continuing this. And in this context, the student in this text put 7 questions to his teacher. And these 7 questions are described in the 51st verse of the text. We already discussed, but just to go back to the background of the text. Ko nama bandhat kathamesha kataha katham pradishthasya katham vimokshaha koso anatma paramakka atma tayor viveka kathametat uchidam. So, what are these questions? What is bondage? How did this bondage arise? And how does it continue to exist? And how to get out of this? So these 4 questions have already been more or less answered briefly in the course of discussions. Bondage is nothing but identification with this body-mind complex instead of our true reality. And it arises, well, it's just like asking the question, when did the snake enter the room? We mistake the rope for the snake. So that question is relevant only so long as we believe there is a snake, which is actually not there. So the bondage itself is actually unreal, but we realize the unreality of this bondage only when we come out of it. So, and then how to get out of this? Through reading scriptures, through karma yoga, disinterested activities, and feeding the mind with good food, spiritual food, so that the mind will take a turn towards higher spiritual ideas. The 5th question is being discussed right now, and of course we discussed this yesterday. The 5th question is, what is anatma? Now, this is a very interesting and very important word. So those of you who have studied Buddhist philosophy may be familiar with this term. In Pali, it is called anatta. So ma becomes ta in Pali, and this vernacular form prakrit. So anatma in Vivekachudamani Vedanta and anatta in Buddhist philosophy are 2 totally different things that we have to understand. Anatma is a concept in Buddhism which emphasizes the absence of any permanent entity. Because Buddhist philosophy of all the 4 important schools of Buddhism plus the early Buddhism, they all emphasize the unreality of any eternal substance. So I mentioned this, there are 5 distinct streams in Buddhist philosophy. The one is the early Buddhism, mostly built on the foundations of the Pali canonical literature. the three baskets called Tripidakas, Sutta Pidaka, Vinaya Pidaka, Abhidhamma Pidaka. Most of you may be familiar with one of the texts called Dhammapada, which is a part of Sutta Pidaka, which is arguably the most popular, maybe not the most profound Buddhist text. So, that's Pali Canonical literature. Then from 2nd century BC onward, that means around 250-60 years after the passing away of Buddha, 4 distinct schools of Buddhist philosophy emerged, and that evolution continued till about 6th or 7th century AD, for almost 900 years. 2 schools of idealism and 2 schools of realism. 2 schools of idealism as related to Mahayana Buddhism, which became popular in countries like China, Japan, and its later offspring called Vajrayana in Tibet. So these 2 schools are called Shunyavada and Vijnanavada. Shunyavada emphasizes the absolute in reality, or in a way, the absolute category, not reality. The absolute category called Shunya or nothingness, or the great void, the great empirical void. The great emptiness, as they translate into English. So that is one school of idealism. The second one is subjective idealism. It's called Sautranti or Vaibhava. It's called Vijnanavada school or Yogacara system. I don't want to focus too much of time on this because I want to give the background. So Yogacara Vijnanavada is a school of Buddhist idealism. It is very close to, in a way, it is a prelude, made much more deeper than Berkeley's subjective idealism. It is called Yogacara Vijnanavada. There are 2 schools of realism, Sautrantika and Vaibhashika. One emphasizing the direct perception, Pratyaksha, the other emphasizing inference, Anumana. So that means about Buddhist tradition, Buddhist philosophical evolution. But they all emphasize the fundamental doctrine or dogma of Buddhism, that is anatta. There is no atman. There is no such thing as an absolute, eternal, everlasting thing like atman. That's an important point to remember. That concept, that dogma is totally different from what the word anatma means in Vedanta philosophy. I am emphasizing this point because this is a very important part of the whole text. Anatma in Vedantic tradition, in Vivekachudamani, means all that we falsely identify ourselves with. The relative entities, the phenomena, the empirical, the relative world. And that includes our body, psychophysical mechanism, the phenomenal world, the empirical world, the world of ideas, emotions and feelings and concepts. All that exist for some time, maybe for a few seconds as an insect, maybe for billions of years, maybe the universe. But still they all belong to time, belong to space, belong to causation. So they all are to be called anatman, means that which is not atman. So there's an interesting twist in this context. The teacher doesn't answer the question directly. In fact, he wants to lead the student into a proper understanding of what is atman. His main question is what is atman, and what is non-atman is a relative question. But the teacher takes a new turn. What he says, if you understand what is anatman, then you will know what is atman. So suppose you are given a block of stone, a square-shaped stone, and you are asked to, you are in a sculpture, you are trying to sculpt, let's say, a statue of Buddha. Buddha is already inherent there within the stone. But you don't see that Buddha. You remove all the unnecessary parts. What you get is Buddha. So that's one way of looking at the whole process. You chisel out all the unnecessary, irrelevant parts of the stone block of stone, and what you get back as a result is the statue of Buddha. So If you get a clear understanding of all the false notions you have got, then you will know what is the right notion. So, normally we live in this world, we think this body is real. That's the most primitive stage of human evolution, philosophically speaking. And we think all that is related to this body is real. And maybe a much more highly evolved version may think all that he feels, attitudes, emotions are real. A philosopher, a scientist may think all his ideas are more real than the body or emotions. So, all these are included within this non-atman. And non-atman in a way corresponds to the relative reality. So the teacher is drawing the student's attention to the unreality and reality of the relative. The relative is also real, relatively real. The relative is also unreal. From the absolute point of view, it is unreal. So I know it's a bit of a dialectical, polemical expression, but that's the beauty and the charm of the Vedanta philosophy. It gives you presents a wonderful fairyland for your intellect, and if you can move out, you can, if you can enjoy higher philosophy, you are actually reaching closer to God. Because to that extent, you are moving away from the world of senses. That's the thing. Not that philosophy takes you straight to the doorsteps of God, but it takes you as far away from the world of senses as possible. So here the teacher is emphasizing this point. What is Atman? What he says is whatever is not anatman is Atman. So naturally he draws our attention to what is anatman. And yesterday we discussed this. I will continue from where we left yesterday. Yesterday we discussed sukshma-sharira. Sukshma-sharira is subtle body. And before that we discussed sthula-sharira, the gross body. Sthula-sharira is the physical mechanism. Sukshma-sharira is the real personality of a person. Yesterday I mentioned to you, when the body is pushed through the crematorium, the sthula-sharira, the gross body is gone. But if the person is really a great man, he starts growing the moment his body is pushed to the tube. Then only you remember the greatness, the grandeur, the glory of the great man who died. So that's the real personality. The real personality corresponds to Sukshma-sharira. So Puryashtagam it is called. 8 units. All the 5 senses of action, 5 senses of perception, Jnanendriya, Karmendriya, 5 elements, Pancha Mahabhutas, 5 vital energy dimensions, Pancha Pranas, and then the internal organs called mind, intellect, the memory system, and the ego system, that is called Antakaranas. 5 units, Avidya, Kama and Karma. Avidya is the absence of the real notion as to what we are, and as a result of it, mind gets filled with desire. As a result of desire, we do karma, action, we engage in different activities to fulfill those desires. So these 8 units constitute Puri Ashtaka, 8 cities. They constitute the subtle personality of a human being. As I mentioned, we remember great men and great women, and those great men and great women start growing in stature actually when the body is gone. Because we remember the teachings, the thoughts they had in their mind. It's part of mind, is part of Sukshma-sharira. The intellect, the ideas that came from them, emotions and feelings, the wonderful things they teach. All these people remember when the physical body, Sthula Sharira, is reduced to ashes. So that Sukshma Sharira is part of the anatman. So that's what we stopped yesterday. Now there is a third one, is called Karana-sharira. In English we may call it causal body. So the gross, the subtle and the causal body is called Karana-sharira. This Karana-sharira has got some other interesting names. What we call Maya is this Karana-sharira. Avidya is Karana-sharira. Prakriti is Karana-sharira. Shakti is Karana-sharira. Trigunatmika also is Karana-sharira. So there are some of the verses here which are quoted in every single Vedantic text. In Vivekananda's complete works, these are quoted verbatim at least 7-8 times. These two verses, please remember the verses, one is 111 and 110 verses, which are classical definitions of relativity, empirical world, and also Maya, Avidya, Shakti, etc. Swamiji's definition is almost verbatim. That is Sanna Pyasanna Vivayatnyano. It is neither existence nor non-existence, nor neither with parts nor without parts, nor the combination of both. Swamiji practically translates these whole verses. So that's how we. So before that, just to give you a layman's understanding of what is Maya. That's what I'm trying to do. If you look at this word Maya, M-A-Y-A. There are two words here. Ma is a negative element in Sanskrit grammar. Ma with sannantam. It means Ma gachadu, don't go there. Ma vadadu, don't speak. Ma agachadu, don't come here. These are the words used. So Ma actually it contains negating factor, which relates to non-existence. So Ya is actually a pronoun. Ya Devi Sarvabhuteshu Matrurupena Samsthita, the mother who is present in everyone as the divine mother of the universe. This is Devi Mahatmya. Ya actually is a kind of pronoun. So she who lives in the hearts of all as the divine mother. Now you don't use a pronoun with regard to something which is not there. See, that boy, that gentleman, that gentleman must be there somewhere. You don't use the word a pronoun without a proper noun somewhere. In the context of a proper noun, only use a pronoun. Okay, now here, Ya shows or indicates something is there. Ma indicates it is not there. So from the absolute point of view, it is unreal. From the relative point of view, it is a reality. This world. This world is a reality. We live in this world. We are part of this world. We interact with this world. So you can't say it is not there. But then it's also true that this world, as this world, will not be there all the time. And was not there all the time. Before Big Bang, this world, as we find today, did not exist. And after Big Crunch, it won't exist. Just maybe hypothetically speaking. So, that which exists for some time, but doesn't exist for all time, is Maya. So, it is what we call Avidya. Ya na vidyate sa avidya. That which doesn't exist is Avidya. Here also there is a very profound philosophical interpretation. When you use the word, it's not there, you don't use that expression in the context of something which can never be there. See, for example, there are 50 people here in this hall. You would say there are only 50 people, not 55. Because there are 50 people, there is a possibility that there may be 55 people may be there, maybe sometime later. But you don't use the word there is no truck here. You don't use the word there is no elephant here. Why? You don't use that word in the context of something which even hypothetically, even as a concept, cannot ever exist. So whatever is obviously unreal or impossible, even hypothetically impossible, you don't use the word negative. It is not there. Because unless you want to be certified by psychiatrists. So we use the word it is not there only with regard to something which for which there is a remote possibility of existing there. With regard to something which doesn't even have a remote possibility of existence, we don't say it's not there. And we don't say it is there because it cannot exist. So, Shankaracharya says, Ya na vidyate sa vidya. People may mistake this empirical world to be the absolute world. So, another very obvious way of illustrating this point is from the Chandogya Upanishad. Vacharam ghanam vikaro namadheyam mrittigityeva satyam. This statement. It means this. Suppose there is a pile of soil or mud somewhere. On one side, on the other side, there are hundreds of pots and pans made of soil. Let's say glasses, cups and pots and pans made of soil. Now some people may say each glass is different from each other glass. So a pot made of clay is different from a glass made of clay. People may, because you don't use a pot for drinking water. So you use only a glass or a cup. So it is different. But from the absolute point of view, clay is the only reality. So the multiplicity of plurality or different names and different forms are only empirically real, relatively real, not absolutely real. That's what Vedanta says. See, gold and different ornaments made of gold. A necklace is different from a ring or something else because of shape, size and so on and utility value. But they are not absolutely different. Because gold is the what you call upadana material cause for ornaments, for rings and necklaces, or only gold. From the absolute point of view, these names and forms, this is called ring, this is called necklace, these differences, these varieties are only empirically real, not absolutely real. They are only relatively real, not absolutely real. So you find the Upanishad sages tell you that these differences are only related to the differences in terms of names and forms. The substance is the same. So like that, from the absolute point of view, this world is unreal. From the non-absolute point of view, this world is real. So the world is relative. So the relativity contains an element of reality. It also is not real from the absolute point of view, because these varieties and pots and pans made of the same clay, they are the same, only clay is real. These names and forms are only empirically real, relatively real, not absolutely real. Like this world, our body, all this sthula-sharira, the gross body, sukshma-sharira, the subtle body, all these are only relatively real, not absolutely real. So that is called Karana-sharira or Maya. Now there are 2-3 important verses which I want to discuss elaborately, which are very famous, which constitute the pillars of Vedanta or Advaita philosophy. So Shankaracharya makes it in a very in a kind of categorical imperative, use the word, see, prasaktasya ko nishedha, prasaktasya ka prastavaka. Aprasaktasya ko nishedha, aprasaktasya ka prastava. What is obviously real, you cannot deny it. And you don't have to assert it, affirm it. If you say, I appreciate you, means really is not appreciating. If you really appreciate it, you don't make a statement about it. If you make a statement, it is dilutes, little water is added. So Shankaracharya says, what is obviously real, absolutely real, you don't need a statement. Of course, you cannot deny it. So neither affirmation nor negation with regard to something which is absolutely, obviously the absolute reality. And that is true of the absolute unreality also. About what is absolutely, obviously unreal or improbable, even hypothetically, from a conceptual point of view, impossible, you don't affirm it because it is obviously unreal, and you don't have to negate it because its absence is also obvious. That's what Shankaracharya says. So then why do we say this world is mithya, maya? Because people may mistake this world, this relative world, as the absolute reality, as most people do. So the purpose of the description is to remind us of the fact that this world, this relative empirical world of multiplicities and pluralities constitute only the relative reality, not the absolute reality. That is the purpose of these 2-3 statements. So Swamiji's Jnana Yoga lectures are in a way built around these ideas, especially his lectures on Maya, illusion and so on. All these are built upon the solid rock of these few verses. Swamiji translates these. The glory of Swami Vivekananda was, all these he put in modern English language, he presented before these international, global audience. So now we will come to those verses. The first one is 110th verse. Karana-sharira or causal bodies explained. Because so far we have already distinguished the gross body pertaining to the non-atman and the subtle body relating to the objects like sound, experiences, etc. Avyakta namni paramesha-sakti anadya avidya trigunatmika para karyanumeya sudhyaiva maya yaya jagat sarvamidam prasuyate. So maya is called avyakta. Avyakta means the unmanifested. So paramesha-sakti, if you are a conventional believer in a creator God, then also you can get a clear understanding of Maya. It is the power of God that manifests in the form of this created world. So Advaita accommodates all other views. Advaita accommodates all non-Advaitic views also. It is an all-accommodating oneness, or it is an all-accommodating oneness, not one as separate from 2, 3, etc. That is why it is called Advaitam, non-dual. Advaita is called not one. Ekam, Advaitam. So both, if you use the word Ekam, one, immediately in the mantras, in the Upanishads, the word Ekam, one, is followed invariably by the word non-dual. One and non-dual. There is no second, because that one which accommodates second, third, fourth, everything, so nothing has to be counted after that. In that respect, it is said. So, anadi, it is anadi. So, avidya is, it is beginningless, but it has an end. It is actually a logical fallacy in the light of modern empirical logic. What is beginningless cannot have an end. That itself shows avidya is something that we mistake to be real so long as we are within it. And it is something that we recognize, we realize to be unreal when we are out of it. That's avidya. Avidya is beginningless. Just to see, when did this rope become the snake? You have to remember the old ancient illustration, some of our modern thinkers say, the old rope never breaks, the old snake never dies. Because the snake rope analogy was used in most of the philosophical works right from 2nd century BC onwards. Nagarjuna in his Madhyamika Karika, Chandragirti in his commentaries to 6th century, and even the Vasubandhu and Dignaga, even the Mimamsaka text like Kumarila, Prabhagara, from 2nd century BC onwards, you find this strong, unbreakable rope and this deathless snake. Because the illustration is so very apt. Again, the dark room, not enough light, there is something lying on the floor, dark in color, somewhat curved in shape, and you have seen a snake the previous day in a zoo or a forest, so you think this is a snake, or you may mistake that rope for a crack on the floor, or a thin stream of water, or a curved stick. So, Sarpa, Jaladhara, Danda, Bhuchidra. These are 4 words used in the ancient Sanskrit text. You may mistake that curved piece of rope for a snake, or a crack on the floor, or a thin stream of water, or a curved stick. Now, when you bring light, if somebody asks you the question, where did the snake go? When did it come to this room? You realize the question is totally irrelevant. So, when you come out of Maya, then you don't really ask the question, when did Maya begin? Because the question doesn't arise. Frequently, in logic there is one problem. We try to follow the path of logic, trying to understand what can only be really understood following the path of experience. So, frequently we try to chalk out a GPS system for the mind and thoughts, which is really not possible. So, very often we forget that when we evolve and progress in spiritual life through prayer and meditation, or through contemplation, or even by going to a library and reading a spiritual classic, even within that short time, our mind evolves. The doubts that we have right now may not be there after reading a good book, or the doubts will be different. So as we evolve in spiritual life, our mind also evolves. So very often we forget this fact, and we try to logically get a clear picture of the absolute spiritual reality, which can only be understood as an experience. So that's an important point, remember. So that's why avidya or maya, or ignorance as it is called as a categorical imperative, is something that we consider to be real so long as we are within it, but realize to be unreal the moment you come out of it. So the question doesn't arise when it is going to end. It is no more there. It's not going to end because to begin with, it was not there. But it is there. Why? Well, how do you ask? How can you ask? It is anadi. Because inherited wrong notions, going through cycles, different cycles of life, we somehow identify ourselves with all that is not Atman. We fail to recognize the reality of Atman. So we go on identifying ourselves with all that is not Atman. This is nature, human life. So it is beginningless, so anadi. It is no adi, it is no beginning. But it is santa, it has an end. Why? Because the moment we realize that it is a rope, but by bringing light, we recognize it is not a snake. So the moment we come out of Maya, we immediately understand In fact, it was not there. It was not there, so it has no beginning. That's an important thing. There are two types of beginninglessness, so to speak. Something that we mistake to be there and eventually recognize it is not. It has no beginning, but it has an end. When you get the right notion, it is not. Then there is something else which is also beginningless. Right? It is always there, so it has no beginning. And it will always be there, so it has no end. Brahman. Brahman is anadi. It has no beginning because it always exists in the past, present and future. It will never cease to exist, so it always exists. It is deathless, it is beginningless. But avidya is beginningless because it was not there to begin with. It has an end because you get the right understanding, it is gone. So it is an aberration. Now what Shankaracharya says, it is something that defies your definition. Words cannot explain it because words can explain only something that can be explained as is or is not. Or it cannot explain anything which is beyond it. Maya doesn't deserve any description, so it is neither is nor is not. Brahman is beyond definition. It also is neither is nor is not from the empirical point of view. Am I connecting with you? Mm-hmm. So it's a bit involved logic. So then Trigunatmika para. That means sattva-guna, rajo-guna, tamo-guna. So it is avyakta. It is essentially avyakta. But it consists of three gunas. Sattva-guna, rajo-guna, tamo-guna. Because it consists of these three gunas, it becomes the ground of evolution of this universe. Avidya. So avidya is something called prakriti. From prakriti, mahattatva. Mahattatva means the cosmic intelligence. Then egoism, which has got sattva-guna, rajo-guna, tamo-guna dimensions. From that all this evolved. That is the Sankhya and Yoga explanation of evolution to parinama. We'll come to that later. Karya-numeya. Karya means effect. Karana means cause. So how do we know there is this Maya? The fact that there is all these empirical things which are not there all the time, but still it is there. What is totally unreal we never experience, even at the empirical level. It may be unreal from the absolute point of view. The absolute reality is only Brahman. But at the empirical level, we all experience. We are part of this world. And this world is the effect of this avidya. So how do we infer the possibility of the existence of avidya? Because we observe this world, this multiplicity, plurality, this manifoldness of the created world. So from this we understand there is such a thing as the relative, empirical, phenomenal world, which is there, but it will not be there all the time. From the highest point of view, from the most absolute point of view, it is not real, but from the relative point of view, it is there. So, from the effect we understand, there is such a thing as Atma. Sudhyaiva Maya. Now, if it is something that is beginningless, but it comes to an end, which we can only infer from a metaphysical point of view, how do we understand? So for that, we must read the writings of the great sages who have gone through this spiritual evolution and who have expounded the unreality, the absolute unreality of the relative and the relative reality of the relative. Because the relative is relatively real and the relative is absolutely unreal. What is to be absolutely unreal will always be there. If Maya were absolute reality, it will never cease to exist. That's an important point. Maya were an absolute reality, it will be always there. If snake was there in that room, then you bring light, still snake will be there. So what you mistook to be snake is now understood to be rope. So what happens is, when a spiritual seeker, through gradual evolution, through spiritual practices, when that spiritual seeker reaches the highest experience level, what happens is, what till now he considered to be the world is now seen to be Atman. What you mistakenly thought to be snake is now correctly recognized to be the rope. So a Jivan Mukta, liberated soul, continues to live in the world. He doesn't run away from the world, but his perspective changes. His outlook changes. For Vedanta students, even once you attend a retreat, once you connect with these higher ideas, there is an evolution happening in your mind. The way you look at the world, the way you look at life changes. Not that you become liberated souls. What happens is, you evolve a new outlook, a new perspective of interpreting life and world. There is something higher than this. So if the stock markets collapse, we are not shocked. It is part of this phenomenal changing world. So we are able to look upon this world of empirical experiences from a higher perspective. So it is not necessary for one to realize this truth and become a Jivan Mukta, liberated soul. It may take maybe a few more births. But even a conceptual conviction of this will be very helpful. And Shankaracharya makes it very clear. He says, these ideas will console you as a loving mother. So that is Shankaracharya's famous statement. He says, Vedantic ideas play the role of an affectionate mother or grandmother. And if there is a shock, there is a problem, this idea, all these things are part of the changing phenomenal world. You are not shocked. What happens? This is part of it. So that gives us the mental strength and the ability to look upon life from a higher perspective. That was Suddhyaiva Maya. These higher saints, their teaching should be listened to, then we should contemplate on them. Then you will understand the fact that this world is only a relative entity, it is not absolute entity. When we misunderstand, when we misinterpret this world, this relative world as the absolute reality, then only the problems start. When we mistakenly think that stock markets will always remain the same, money will never be lost, the prices will never go down, and then we build up dreams, then suddenly all this happen, we are shocked. But when we understand the changeability or changing nature of the phenomenal world, its Maya aspect, then we are not shocked. And that is the Suddhi. Suddhi means the real intellect, purified perspective or intellect. From this word only, this universe emerges. So, in fact, Shankaracharya's commentary, not in this book but elsewhere, he gives a very interesting illustration of the difference between a liberated soul who has understood the relativity of this relative world and the reality of the absolute Brahman. He gives an illustration, and this is applicable even for those who at least intellectually connect with this higher idea. At a different level, this will be helpful even for students of Vedanta. I said, Like a mother, the scripture consoles you. That's what Shankaracharya stated. Now, if the illustration is this. Suppose you are a musician and he's a court musician, and the king may ask him to come to the court and play, perform. In fact, a musician will be very anxious to put up a good performance. In ancient times, kings may behead him for bad performance, may throw him out, he may be imprisoned. The impulses of the medieval kings. So they were so childish, they may behead a musician who accidentally could not perform to the highest degree of perfection. So the musician will be very anxious. That's the nature of those who don't understand Advaita, even philosophically. But there is another musician, he is sitting in his home, apartment. So once in a while he brings out his instrument and plays. He won't be anxious. There is no king whom he wants to please, from whom he may fear punishment or may expect reward. So he is at leisure, he can be relaxed and play at leisure. He need not be anxious about it. So those who at least intellectually understand Vedanta philosophy can live in this world like the musician who plays his instrument in his own private apartment, and not like the musician who is afraid of punishment because he expects reward, playing in the court of the king. So that's the difference that Shankara Rajnya would say. He says, Rajnyaga Veena Vadanavat. He says, a king, suppose a king who is himself a musician, plays in his own court, he is not bothered. If the courtiers don't like, they can go away. He is not bothered. But a court musician will be bothered. So a liberated soul or a Vedanta student can behave and act like a king playing his own violin in his own court. Others who don't know Vedanta, who expect this relative world to be the absolute, this changing phenomenal world to be the unchanging reality, they are like the court musician who may be called at midnight and asked to play the court. So his heart will be palpitating, he will be anxious. So it's very interesting. Rajnyaga Veena Vadanavat. The king who plays his violin in his own court. That is the characteristics of a liberated soul or a student of Vedanta. That's an example. Now here is another statement, verse, that is 111th, which Swamiji translates verbatim while explaining with Maya. In fact, this is Sannapi Asannapi Bhuyatmigano, Bhinnapi Abhinnapi Bhuyatmigano, Sanga Pyananga Vibhuyatmigano, Mahadbuddha Arivachaniya. It is not real. That is Sat Na Api. Why it is not real? It is not the absolute reality, because absolute reality is only Brahman or Atman. And if Maya were absolutely real, then that Maya will never cease to exist. Not only there will be two absolute realities, which will be contradictory to the central logic of Advaita. So, Maya is not absolute reality. It is not unreal. As I mentioned, if Maya were totally unreal, we won't be experiencing it. If it's totally, absolutely, obviously unreal and impossible, we won't make a statement about it. We will never make a statement about anything which cannot even be conceptually thought of or intellectually contemplated upon. Our words, ideas, expressions and descriptions are only related to things that may hypothetically exist, at least. So Maya is not absolutely unreal, nor absolutely real. As I mentioned, the rope is not a snake, but the snake is in the forests. You have seen the snake, that memory is there in our mind. When we see the rope, we mistake that rope for something like the snake that you saw in the forests. So the snake is not totally unreal. So the world is not totally unreal. That's again another very important point to remember. I am very sorry to tell you, many of the modern translations of Advaita texts fail to emphasize this point. They very foolishly, ridiculously say that the world, according to Vedanta, Advaita, the world is unreal. Advaita doesn't say the world is unreal. Advaita tells you the world is not real in the absolute sense of the word real. What is real will never cease to exist. And what is real will never undergo any change. Our body undergoes change every day. So what is absolutely real should be experienced as the seeing in the past, present and future. In dream, waking state and dreamless sleep state. So the majority of modern translations which appear from year to year wrongly, ridiculously interpret Vedanta as a life-negating, world-negating philosophy. That's in fact, it all happened when a Portuguese clergyman called Bishop Conti translated a portion of Shankara's philosophy. He was working as a missionary in Goa in the 17th century. He translated a portion of Shankara's commentary into Portuguese, and the word he used in that text was what we now may call something like totally unreal. The word illusion. Vivekananda was the first great modern thinker who tried to correct this wrong notion in his lectures in London, where he corrects this, perhaps you may remember. He was the one who corrected this wrong notion. Maya is not illusion. Maya is only relativity. The world, otherwise it would be very ridiculous. In India I have to share platforms with politicians who are notorious for their total ignorance of Advaita. And they foolishly, they will ridicule. India, I am talking about Indian politicians in India. Oh, where the Shankaracharya says, I am not here, you are not here, this chair is not here, this hall is not here. How foolish. So, because there is so much of misunderstanding all over the world about Advaita philosophy. So, that's why Shankaracharya says, Maya is not absolutely real. It is not absolutely unreal. Na asat. It is not absolutely unreal. And it is not a combination of both, because combination of the real and unreal cannot exist. It's a logical fallacy. And it is not different from the real. It is not different from the real. This may require some explanation. It is not different from the real. It is not different from the real. So I can explain this in the light of the analogy. Okay, now when you bring light, what happens? What you previously mistook to be the snake is now seen to be the rope. So the same snake is now correctly recognized to be the rope. There are now two entities, only one entity. That's why it is not different. Actually, what you thought to be the snake is actually the rope. The same substance, the same entity, the same thing which you wrongly thought to be the snake is now recognized to be the snake. Similarly, when a Jivan Mukta, liberated soul, a person who has realized the reality of Advaita, he continues to see the same world. He continues living the same world, but his outlook changes. He will be looking at this world from a different perspective. Like the king playing violin in his own court. So the world doesn't change, but the world is seen from a different perspective. That's why it is not different, it is not non-different. It is not different. Same word, but it is not different, because the way you look upon the world will be different. The perspective changes. And it is not a combination of both. So, the total non-definability or the inexplicable nature of Maya is explained through a very graphic, illustrative language. That's the meaning here. It is not made of parts, not Sangha. Now, if something is made of parts, it could decay. If one part goes wrong, the whole machine stops functioning. So, it is not made of parts. But at the same time, it is not without parts. From the empirical point of view, it may appear to be made of parts. But from the highest point of view, it is one reality. And so, it is wonderful, and its real definition is, it is inexpressible, it is beyond description, indescribable. It is something that you only experience when you are within it, which you realize to be unreal when you are out of it. I mean, when you bring light, then the snake is no more there. So long as there is not enough light, there is a snake. And you feel the snake may bite you, it may be cobra or viper, whatever it is. You go on analyzing it. But all these become irrelevant when you bring light, because you understand it is not there. Now, I don't think there can be a more clear description of this phenomenon. The phenomenal reality, the empirical reality is not denied. But empirical absoluteness is denied. Whatever is empirical cannot be absolute. If it is absolutely unreal, like for example the horn of a hare. The horn of a hare is Shashavishana, is called. If it is hair, it cannot have a horn. If it has a horn, it could be some other animal, not hair. So mutual contradiction. So this Maya is something that's beyond description, beyond definition. It is something that we cannot explain at all. And then another point is anirvachaniya. And at the same time, the whole universe is an effect of this Maya. So even while living in this world, you can get also linked to the absolute reality by reading scriptures, by listening to these ideas. We get a vague idea of a transcendental reality which is beyond this relative plane. Once we are convinced of that reality, at least at the intellectual plane, it becomes like a mother consoling a child. That's what Vichendracharya says. Okay, now we have half an hour interaction. We have not completed the description of Karana-sharira Maya. We'll continue. A little more to be said in some other verses. Now you can have interaction for maybe half an hour.
I have a question. So in this framework, could you expound on Sri Ramakrishna telling us that Maya and Shakti are the same?
Yeah. Shakti is the Paramesha Shakti. Yeah, Vivekachudamani. Yeah. From the Advaita point of view, you see, in our spiritual evolution, as we evolve at one stage, we perceive the reality of this Maya as the creative power of the universe, of God. God, it comes in the next verses tomorrow. This Maya manifests in 3 dimensions. First of all, it conceives the truth, the reality, and also it projects the false, what is actually false, and at the same time, the same Maya can help you to go beyond itself. So it has got avarana, vikshepa, Jnana, 3 dimensions. So the author continues in the coming days, we will have the discussion. So Sri Ramakrishna says The same Maya is nothing but the power of Shakti, creating, functioning, Ichha-sakti, Jnana-sakti, Kriya-sakti, and the willpower and our ability to understand this world, our ability to act, to behave and live. So it's just like, a snake that is not moving is the absolute reality. When it's moving, it has got an energy. But it is the Shakti dimension of the same Brahman. Maya is not different from Brahman. Maya is the creative dimension of Brahman. But Brahman by itself, it is beyond creation, beyond projection. But then, when we evolve in spiritual life, we don't begin with the last, highest peak. We start taking steps slowly in our own spiritual evolution. So when we pray to God, when we go to temple or a church or any place of worship, when we read scriptures, at that time we experience this Maya as the creative power, and the same Maya can act as a guiding mother. That's called Maya has got the Jnana. When it is in the sattvic aspect, it is Jnana. Maya is nothing but the sattvika dimension of the creative power of God. Paramesha-sakti is the word used in this verse. That's what Sri Ramakrishna is talking. But in Sri Ramakrishna's life, you have to remember, he didn't confine himself to any particular perspective. Sri Ramakrishna's mission was different. At some level, he was always like a jnani from the dialectical Advaitic perspective. At some other level, he talked like a bhakta, a devotee of the most exalted type, like a mystic, the medieval mystics and all that. At some level, he was acting as a person with a mission for the world. When he trained his own disciples to teach the Vedantic message, to give the Vedantic message to the whole world, he acts like a karma yogi. So, in the life of great spiritual teachers, you find they don't limit their personality or their functions to one dimension. But the text, one particular perspective is presented in the Vivekachudamani text. The same Shankaracharya was the one who wrote the most exalted devotional poetry, praising all gods and goddesses. And he was the one who formulated the mantras that we use for puja. So people sometimes, in India I have come across many dry dialectical thinkers, they would tell you, Bhajagovindam cannot be Shankaracharya's, because he was a deep jnani. So the only medicine for them is to read the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna. You cannot convince them. Because without really understanding the correct personality and the teaching of the Vedanta, many people sometimes take a very lopsided, partial view. Oh, Shankara was a jnani. Sri Ramakrishna was only bhakta. These are all wrong views. So you find the teachings of these great teachers, the highest philosophy and the highest devotion, rolling into one.
So Swamiji, what if you truly say that if they really are the same thing, but just simply two different aspects?
Yeah, yesterday I mentioned at the experience level, bhakti and jnana are the same. But let us say, I'll give an example. Well, I can give the example of some of the Vaishnava or Shakta devotees Sri Ramakrishna refers to, or some of the devotees of the most exalted type in different traditions. So when I mentioned this yesterday in the evening discussion, when a sincere devotee reaches a point of spiritual evolution, when he breaks away from the mechanical ritualistic dimension, when he endures the level of communion with the reality, maybe Jesus became the core of Christianity. Actually, it is Advaita. So, you find this in the poets of the Sufis, in the writings of the great mystics of the medieval times. Yesterday I was mentioning this, the way of a pilgrim, the Russian, he was almost ignorant, not illiterate, the pilgrim. When he when he mastered the Jesus prayer, he was always in a state of natural, spontaneous prayerfulness. Then he found the whole world illumined by the presence of the Lord. Now, if you limit your idea of God to a form with some characteristics, that form cannot become an omnipresent spiritual idea. So, as we evolve, your understanding of the reality becomes more and more complete. Advaita, from the philosophical point of view, presents before you the view of the most exalted spiritual teacher or spiritual aspirant who breaks away from the lower levels, not lower, more incomplete levels of mechanical rituals, practices, when he enters the level of direct communion with the reality. It is Advaita. Wherever there is the identity or oneness of the devotee and his ideal of devotion, his focus of devotion, it is nothing but non-dualism. We call it mysticism, but in Shankaracharya's philosophy, all these ideas have been formulated into a full-fledged, compact philosophical system. That's what I mean. See, I can give an example. You see, in the Gospel, there are some very interesting scenes. A devotee suddenly, actually a wanderer, he moves about, and one man comes with a mango plant, a small mango plant in his hands. Another man comes, he looks very odd. He takes a plunge into Ganga and comes out. He doesn't even wipe up the water. And he goes and stands in front of the deity and he chants a devotional hymn and the whole temple shakes. You find it, and he goes and shares food with the dogs and cats who are spreading around. And then Sri Ramakrishna asked his nephew Hridaya to go after him. And that Paramahamsa, he was a great wanderer. He doesn't welcome him. He tried to dissuade him with throwing stones. But Hridaya follows him. And then when he turns back, he gives one advice. When you stop seeing any distinction between the pure Ganga water and the ditch water, when you see the same divine reality everywhere, that is the sign of the highest experience. Jnana. That's the earlier, and then he goes ahead. And Sri Ramakrishna becomes very much disturbed. He says, "Oh mother, don't make me like that. Because if you reach that state, if you live in that state, you can't teach anything to anyone. You are always in a state of perfect communion with their reality." So from that level you have to come down several steps to be able to teach others, to inspire others. For that function, you have to come several steps below in order to be of use or spiritual assistance to his disciples. So he comes down and teaches the way. So wherever, in whatever tradition you find this idea of a devotee or a spiritual seeker who transcends, goes beyond the mechanical, the formal, ritualistic practices and reaches a point of direct communion with God. Actually, the word God may be used instead of Brahman. It is actually Advaitic experience.
Right.
Yeah, that's what it is. Even in literature, poetry, you find they are not yogis. That doesn't stay with them. But for a flash, a great classical writer may get a glimpse of the universe, some universal spiritual truths. But it's only flash. They come back. Dostoevsky came back after writing Brothers Karamazov. Again he drank vodka and became fully drunk. He didn't become a yogi, but he would not have been able to write a book like Brothers Karamazoo without transcending the lower planes of human emotions and feelings, as he got a glimpse of the transcendental, which is in a way, I don't call it Advaita, what I mean to say, there is a level of communion with some universal spiritual truths, which alone can enable a great writer to write a book which will remain a classic. So you can read Vyasa, Valmiki, all the great ancient poets of Sanskrit tradition. They were great sages, great spiritual teachers, and they wrote immortal classics, which not only teach you but inspire. Inspiration is like fire. Fire should be present there. Then only you can light a candle from it. So that's a difference. So wherever you find this presence of fire, the power to inspire, then there is some glimpse of the transcendental. Without that, a mystic or a writer or a painter will not be able to write that. But the difference is, when great spiritual teachers write, whatever they write become classics. But for others, for writers, they slowly somehow reach that stage, get the transcendental glimpse, and then come back to hit the lowest bottom. That's the problem. That's why great mystics, writers, poets, after reaching the highest peak, they come back. They cannot remain there. They can't bear the burden of remaining at that stage. So they come and hit the rock bottom. That's why Dostoevsky had to get fully drunk in order to remain normal after writing the great immortal classics. Yeah.
There's a wonderful line by T.S. Eliot. He says,
Yes.
humankind cannot bear very much reality. And, but the artist, as you say, has a glimpse of something greater than himself or herself. And it is that transcendental reality. And then often they have to give their whole lives. And it takes such effort and pain, and they have to drink in order to sort of survive, because the world is so painful to them. And to Dostoevsky, when he saw a horse being beaten, he couldn't stand it. And I read a story about Nietzsche that he saw this, I think it was a dog or a horse being beaten, and he couldn't talk after that experience. He went into total silence. And the artist is often so, their nerves are so bare, and that they can feel everything. And it's often so overwhelming.
When you reach the sublime level, through gradual spiritual evolution, prayer, meditation, self-control, then you can remain there.
You can.
Otherwise, what happens, sudden exuberance and exaltation of human genius takes you to this level where you get a glimpse of the transcendental, but that becomes a heavy rock on your hand which you are eager to somehow unload somewhere. So you find, interestingly, Swami Vivekananda as something not so very complimentary to say about the Vaishnava devotees. He used to get excited. They go on singing bhajans, but they don't reach that level of excitement as a great devotee does or should do. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he was a great devotee who reached the highest level and remained there. He did not come back and hit the rock bottom. But sometimes through excitement, they go on singing bhajans. These sound vibrations and melody can create the illusion of mind going upward. And that could give you perhaps a partial glimpse of the transcendental. But danger is, after that, suddenly you fall and reach the rock bottom with a thud.
Right.
So this happens. Oh, please, please, you wanted to say something?
Well, Toynbee, the historian, his perhaps it's relevant. I question. Toynbee's contribution as a historian was that he was starting to address these things as in cultural terms, not just individual.
Yeah.
He was speaking about cultures that would have the spark of inspiration, and that spark of inspiration could devolve into some sort of ecstatic decadence. And he would write about history and culture that way. And we don't want to get caught up too much in the temporal, but from the historical perspective, you can see that these things continue to be relevant, not just individually, but culturally. And it helps us to understand that context, perhaps, if we look at our times through that lens. And Toynbee, who is largely forgotten, should not be, because these are important concepts. Today's this I'll contribute. Today is the 264th anniversary of the founding of one of those two American universities that offered Vivekananda a post after the Parliament of Religions, which he turned down. And the motto of that university is, in thy light we see light. In Latin is the motto. And so it's a reference to scripture and also reference to the Upanishads.
Yeah, there is a very interesting aspect to what we were discussing earlier. So Yoga Sutras, the commentaries on Yoga Sutras and devotional traditions of all world religions insists on certain fundamental disciplines which you have to go through before gradually reaching that level. Yes. And in yoga tradition it's called yamas and niyamas. What we call yamas and niyamas become natural for any sincere spiritual seeker who slowly evolves. When they reach, when they get a glimpse of the transcendental, they don't suddenly come down and hit the rock bottom with a thud. So yama, for example, ahimsa, satya, steya, brahmacharya, parigraha, shaucha, santosha, tapasya, adesha, pridhana, non-violence, truthfulness, non-possession, freedom from greed and contentment, purity of life, so many things. Okay, now, when we get established in these disciplines, what happened, the energy, the spiritual exuberance which are generated by spiritual practices will not flow in the opposite direction, negative direction. So when a person practices and gets established in these 10 fundamental disciplines called yamas and niyamas, what happens is the doors opening to negative channels are blocked and closed. Because when you do chanting, as Swamiji mentioned in the context of Vaishnava devotees, lot of Hare Krishna, Hare Rama, all that. Actually, the melodious symphony and chanting, or even Christian prayers, Hallelujah, all will generate heat and energy, enthusiasm, which are really good. But while doing that, the spiritual seeker should have practiced certain fundamental moral and ethical disciplines. Otherwise what happens? The energy and heat will flow in the opposite direction, and the devotee will not be able to withstand the sudden change from the highest excitement to normal empirical plane. So there should be a middle point. You should not hit the rock bottom. There should be some kind of a cushion on which you should fall, so you won't be hurt. Yes. And that is possible by practicing yamas and niyamas. That's it. So all spiritual disciplines will insist on these fundamental values.
The writer will, the artist will go up the ladder.
Yeah.
But if they're not grounded, the ladder will collapse.
Yeah.
Even if they're on the right ladder, we have a ladder right here. Even if they're on the right ladder, they'll fall off the ladder as they're climbing the ladder. And you don't want to be going up and down the ladder all the time on that roller coaster. You want to kind of stay as high on the ladder as you can. You don't want the ladder to fall apart under you.
Yeah. Before becoming a genius, one should be very careful. So, there's a statement, and there is Sanskrit sloka, which comes, the sloka, without quoting the sloka, I won't be able to remind the whole idea in English. I memorize the sloka. Ye puman adimedhavi chadurna megamasnude adpayu rapavitrova daridra patitopiva. That means a great genius. Adimedha means great genius. A person who is genius, and William James has written elaborately on the finer line of bifurcation between genius and insanity and genius. So now the point is, you become a genius when you focus all your energy resources, physical, nervous energy resources, power of concentration on one focus. That's how you become a genius. It could happen through conscious effort, or it could happen by maybe that's no. The point is, when that happens, there are some of these problems. The ancient sage says he will have one of these four problems. One problem is he may be poor, economically very poor. He won't care for money or material things, or he may have a deviation, undesirable deviation, or he may not have, may not be able to maintain a family, or he may have some kind of serious illness or something, some kind of something that will make him incapable of continuing his life. So what happens is, a person who becomes a genius, he will lose, or rather he will leave certain areas of his life unguarded, without taking care of them. So that becomes his Achilles heel, a problem, source of problem. So these yamas or niyamas, these disciplines, will take care of that problem. So once you get established in these disciplines, then it's okay. Otherwise, extreme focus in one area cannot be achieved without paying a price for it. The price is that some other areas of our life may remain unguarded, unprotected, uncared for. And that can become a liability. That's what happens, what you find in the case of many creative writers like Chekhov, Dostoevsky, and others. People like Tolstoy or Shakespeare did not have that kind of extreme flash of genius which Dostoevsky had.
Right.
They didn't have that kind of transcendental vision. I'm not partial. They didn't, at least to me, my understanding, the ability to penetrate into the depths of human mind in a way which Sigmund Freud himself could not do. Freud had, he gave a very long lecture on Dostoevsky's syndrome. You heard of it? One of 28 lectures, one of the most famous lectures on Dostoevsky. So, the point is that kind of extreme focus and concentration cannot be achieved without paying a price for it. And he was not a yogi, he was not established in yamas and niyamas, as far as I understand. So that's why he had to pay the price for it. And that happens to this, Swamiji refers to Vaishnava devotees, who just went on with great excitement, chanting on. So, they work themselves to a kind of emotional excitement, with leaving their other areas unguarded. So after some time, after the chanting of the hymns, they cannot, when they stop that, they cannot spend their time reading the scriptures. They go to the other extreme. This happens to geniuses like some poets, writers, performers, actors, musicians, because they push themselves in one direction too far, leaving some of the other areas of the mental world unguarded. Please.
No.
We are still 4 minutes.
This is a part of the reading.
Yeah.
There is one word called undifferentiated. The undifferentiated is defined as the perfectly balanced state of the three gunas.
Oh, yeah.
And where there is no manifested universe.
Yeah.
So can you please explain actually?
Is
that the form where the seed of the
I will
universe
explain.
is there or what?
This sattva-guna, rajo-guna, tamo-guna. These three gunas, when they are in an equilibrium, so called samya avastha, there is no creation. There will be some disturbance, some steering, one direction, one way or other. Then only manifestation begins.
Is that Maya? Maya is in that state?
Yeah. That's how Maya is perceived or defined or described as the cause of the universe. Because there is no creation unless there is some stirring, some disruption in this equilibrium. So, really speaking, when these three gunas are always in a perfect state, Maya will remain in its Advaita dimension. That's its original state. That Maya itself gets slightly disrupted when there is a slight the disruption or disturbance in the samya or equilibrium of the three states. When the equilibrium is disturbed or when balance is disturbed, then creation begins. That is true. In fact, that way, that is a Sankhya interpretation of Maya. That's also the Prakriti. In Sankhya, it is called Prakriti is Maya. The source of evolution of the universe and everything is Prakriti. Yeah.
So in individual also it could be like that, right?
Yeah, that's true.
So for individuals they could reach.
Yeah. Then see, that's why Sri Ramakrishna says at the highest samadhi level, there is nothing. You have to come several steps. Then only you reach Om. So called Om itself is coming down. Again, you come several steps. Then only you become manifest. You can be explained. You can have names and forms and differentiation. All this happen as the manifestation progresses. So, please.
Oh, just a short comment. There are so many levels of art and artists, and I was thinking that at the highest level you have a Shakespeare, or a Goethe, or you have a, I'm thinking of a third one. They're complete souls.
Yeah.
And those three gunas, they're all one. They're all united. There isn't more of one than another, and they've reached that point of kind of individuation, where this transcendental and the human can somehow coexist, and one doesn't hurt the other. And someone like Shakespeare, I think, was able to reach that level of wholeness and balance. It's unusual, and it doesn't happen very often. Oh, I thought of the other one was Dante. These people are so whole and integrated. Not everybody reaches that level. Very few.
Well, in fact, we don't know whether Shakespeare or Goethe or any of them practiced any spiritual disciplines or not. We do not know. So, frequently what happens is, when we find a great concept or idea described in a book, we often think that person who has written that book has reached the experience level of that idea. It need not be always so. Look at Valmiki, for example. He was a robber. He was a robber actually.
Valmiki was a robber.
Valmiki, the author of Ramayana.
Oh, yes.
He was a professional robber.
Right.
Oh, Robert.
Yes.
And what happens, he happened to write this great, but before writing this book, he became a great sage. That's what I'm finding.
Yes.
So that evolution happened before he wrote that book. Whether that kind of evolution took place in the life of these great authors whom you refer to, that I may be true, but I do not know. In the case of this professional robber, he was a simple man. He looted, that was the best way to look after his family. Looted people, ambushed people. So once it so happened, a group of sages were walking through forest, and he ambushed them. He tried to loot them all. So one of them, he stopped for a minute, told him, see, we will give you all that we have got. But one question, see, you are doing all these evil deeds, you are looting people, you are killing people. Okay, now for these you have to pay a price. These are all sinful deeds. When you die, you may have to suffer. This doesn't come without paying a price for it. So are you ready for it? What price? Said, I am doing all this to look after my family. He had his wife, children and others. So then you do one thing, you go and ask your mother, parents, wife and children, whether they will share a burden of these sinful consequences. You pay a price for it. Because you have to go to hell and all that. So this simple man, he went and asked his wife, no, I can't do anything about it. That's a source of income for. That's your profession, a looter, a robber. We can't do anything about it. You are doing this, that's the only source, that's your profession. And the children also told him, we can't take any responsibility for your evil deeds. Parents also scolded you, fellow, you are a robber. That's how you bring money to family. That's how you feed us all. This fellow was totally shocked. He went back to the sages. Oh, he was completely broken. See, they are not willing to share the burden of my actions. So he felt terribly shocked. He was completely transformed. And he told the sage, I'm sorry I did all this. Could you help me to change my lifestyle? So the Narada gave him mantra. Mantra is Rama mantra. Rama mantra was the one Gandhi uttered 3 times after he was shot. So that's the only way I can bring your mind to that. So he was given this mantra, this holy name, to chant every day. But this fellow was such an evil fellow, he cannot bring his mind to chanting this holy name. So the sage told him, instead of chanting Rama, you chant Mara. So go on repeating Mara, eventually it becomes Rama, Because he was such an evil person, he could not bring his mind or his tongue to chant this holy name. So you go on chanting Mara. And that was perfectly okay for him. And he did. After some years, the sage came the same way. And he found a big anthill, about 6-7 feet anthill. He knew, I have initiated one robber here. Though he was a robber, he was a good man. Because he was a good man, so he was transformed. He had only one mind. So he was ready for transformation. So he sincerely chanted, and a big anthill developed around him. And after some time, the sage came and poked, and the anthill fell. His disciple, the robber, was sitting there. But he had completely changed. He had become a saint. And that saint wrote Ramayana. So, Valmiki is the name that he got. Valmika means this anthill. So, somebody who happened to realize the supreme truth is sitting within this. It's called Valmiki. Now, I don't know if Shakespeare or Gita underwent that kind of spiritual transformation, because we should remember, a writer or a poet or a musician or a painter can do a wonderful creative art. Now, whether that work gives spiritual inspiration or not intellectual or idealistic or cultural inspiration, but spiritual inspiration. In the case of Valmiki, he became a saint. I would rather equate Valmiki with men like Augustine or Saint Francis of Assisi, rather than Shakespeare or Gita or anybody.
But we know that they were transformed.
Yeah.
Completely.
So that inner transformation, it takes a much deeper level of spiritual connection.
The ones that parallel that are Cervantes and Tolstoy had those transformations. But Shakespeare, no.
Well, we don't know. But here.
Of course, let us, we don't know, I should say.
What about Kalidasa?
Kalidasa, another example. Kalidasa was not a very wonderful man at the beginning. He was, what happened? But somebody made him a devotee of Mother Kali, and there was a complete transformation. That's how he became Kalidasa. So
he gave up everything, didn't he?
What happened, somebody, he had somewhat a loose in lifestyle. So he was given some spiritual instruction. Then once he got that spiritual instruction, he didn't look back. And he entered temple and sitting there chanting this divine name of Mother. So one day Kali herself had gone for an evening walk. She returned at night And she asked the question, who is inside? Kalidasa answered, what do you want? And Mother Kali was very happy. Somebody could dare to ask, who are you? Then, who are you? She asked. I am Kalidasa. And she was very happy. Kalidasa means servant of Mother Kali.
Oh.
So, Mother Kali was very happy. Here is somebody sitting in my own shrine, and when asking, who are you? Says, I am the servant of Mother Kali. She was very happy. And she asked him to put out his tongue through that narrow door. He didn't see the person. Kalidasa put out his tongue. In the tongue, Mother Kali wrote something, some sacred mantra. And he became Kalidasa, the immortal poet.
Wow.
So now, such stories you find in many traditions. So I would say St. Augustine or St. Francis of Assisi or some of these great mystics who wrote immortal classics. I would say they are better examples than perhaps Shakespeare and others. So that's what I say. Because there is an inner transformation that happened to Augustine, St. Francis of Assisi and others. But remember, we cannot include in that category men like Dostoevsky, because he was a very ordinary person. He was a very ordinary person from a spiritual perspective. He had a glimpse of the transcendental, that's all. But you don't equate him with Kalidasa or maybe St. Augustine or others. Don't do that. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Om Shanti 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 Hari Om Tatsi Sri Ramakrishna Pranamastu.